So if you're like me, you've probably found yourself in a spot where you have a gas tank that is pretty rusty, and you obviously don't want to put gasoline in it because that gasoline is going to contaminate your fuel system. So you've probably looked up, or maybe you haven't, different methods on the internet of how to clean out a kind of rusty or dirty gas tank. And I'd say typically what you find is people will try and clean them out with, say, vinegar. I've seen people even use molasses, or a lot of people use that stuff, evaporust. But what I use that typically works extremely well, and I'm going to show you here today, is this stuff right here, from this brand called Zep. It's acidic toilet bowl cleaner. This can be found at the Home Depot. I'm not sure if it's at Lowe's and Ace Hardware. I think it might be, but I do know for sure that it is carried at the Home Depot. They come in these smaller bottles with this nozzle, or they can come in the gallon jug. But I have had great success with this product for cleaning the rust out of gas tanks that I have acquired for certain projects. This gas tank is off of a 1973 Honda CB550 motorcycle that I'm working on. However, this kind of method will work with any gas tank so long as it's metal, so you can use it on cars, motorcycles, boats, lawnmowers, whatever you got with a metal gas tank that is rusty. So just taking a look here, when you open the cap, I mean, you can see already that it's pretty rusty and gross. And then when you look inside, yeah, it's pretty bad. And if you see right there, I already have a liquid in it, and that's actually vinegar. So I bought this bike about a month and a half ago, and not long after I brought it home, I filled the tank all the way up with vinegar. Again, that is a popular method that a lot of people use. But again, as you can see, especially from this view here, and yes, vinegar was touching this section, as well as the intersection. And you can see a little, you can see a little bare metal right there on the edge, but for the most part, and it's kind of going to be hard to see with the camera, but all along the walls on the inside of the tank, it's still all rusty. So this is a method that I've used a couple times before, and it works flawlessly. It completely strips your tank out to basically bare metal and does it in, I'd say, as little as an hour. So that's kind of what I'm going to do here today. I'm going to drain all this vinegar out. We can take a look inside the entire tank with the vinegar out of it, see what it did so far, and then we can fill it with some Zep acidic toilet bowl cleaner and see where that gets us. So let's move on there. Letting it kind of drain out here. You want a sip of that? It's actually kind of clean. It's not bad. All right, you can work with that. Bring it back when it's time for the acid. All right, so we got the tank back inside here, and you can already tell kind of by looking at the cap area that it definitely is a whole lot better. And that kind of holds true with the inside of the tank as well. You can see, if we can focus, come on. You can kind of see on the edge of there and a little bit on the bottom that there is far more bare metal than there was before. Still plenty of big rust chunks all over the tank, inside on this edge here, on the cap. And especially, it may not focus, maybe too, oh, there we go. At the bottom of the tank, you can see kind of all those big chunks of rust. But the vinegar did do a decent job. You can see kind of the wall there. It's hard to get all the angles with this camera, but you can see the wall there has some bare metal on it. And stripped a lot of the rust off pretty good. I mean, overall, the vinegar did do a good job. And I mean, you'd kind of hope so. Like I mentioned previously, the vinegar had been sitting in there for about a month or so, about a month and a half, I'd say. I keep 2 gallons of vinegar on hand, and the vinegar that was in this, I drained out, and I will reuse it. It is reusable. But now we can kind of move on to the acidic part of it with the toilet bowl cleaner. Pouring it in there. I'm going to pour it in there and mix it with water. This is a 3-gallon tank, so I'll probably do a gallon and a half, or maybe just a gallon of the toilet bowl cleaner, and then dilute it the rest of the way with water filled up to the top. If you're like me and you kind of had time, like I said, I bought this bike about a month and a half ago, so getting the tank cleaned out right away as quickly as possible wasn't necessarily very important to me. I kind of had some time to wait, so that's kind of why I filled it up with vinegar. If you're in the same boat, I would say start off with the vinegar, just to kind of help start breaking down the rust. And then if you get to this point and the vinegar didn't get all the rust out, then step up to the toilet bowl cleaner. This, I didn't take any before pictures, I really should have, but this tank was easily the worst tank I've ever seen on the inside in terms of rust. It was just so thick. But we're at a pretty good point now, and yeah, so let's get this filled up with some acid. Like I said, I'm gonna do about half and half, half acid, maybe a little less than half, and the rest of the way with water. But yeah, should be good. All right, I'll bring you back when it is filled up and we can see where this kind of gets us. I just started to pour in the toilet bowl cleaner, and I just wanted to make a quick clip here because you can see immediately, I mean, you can just tell right now, look how much cleaner that is on that edge there, on the middle part of the tank. The flash rusting that came after draining out the vinegar, it's already all gone. And the same thing with the wall. If I can get a shot of that, yeah, you can kind of see his camera's not really focusing, but you can kind of see on that wall of the tank, it's already significantly cleaner. And that is, again, quite literally instantly pouring in the acid. So pretty instant results, and I'll bring you back in a second with what we get. All right, as you can see now, we are just about filled to the top, looking good. And I know earlier I showed you guys the smaller bottle of the Zep acidic toilet bowl cleaner, but this is the bigger bottle that I use. This is a gallon jug that I bought at the Home Depot. The price on this is $9.99, $10, which isn't bad. And like I mentioned earlier with the vinegar, you can reuse this as well. When you're done, just drain the majority of this back into the jug and it can be reused. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I filled this tank with a gallon of the acidic toilet bowl cleaner, and I filled it the rest of the way up with hot water. Something else I'm going to do, as you can see already, it's kind of already doing its job. It's cleaning up this rim pretty nicely, and this part of the cap that it touched. I'm also throwing in some random kind of hardware into the tank, these nuts and bolts. And what that's going to do is when I throw it in there, I can then shake the tank around with all the hardware in there, and it's going to help break up all the rust that's stuck to all the edges of the tank. So just simply taking some of this and dropping it in, and then when you shake it around, you can hear it all kind of rumbling around in there and breaking up the rust, helping out. A couple things I want to note about the acidic toilet bowl cleaner that I didn't mention earlier is it is acidic, of course, so just be careful when you pour it in. Wear gloves. I have gloves right there. If you do get it on your hands, just simply wash it off. It's not that harmful. It's not gonna, damage you too much. And of course, just be careful with what you get on the tank, depending on what you plan on doing with the tank. As for me, this whole gas tank is getting restored inside and out. On the outside, full repaint, sanded down, restored. So, spilling a little on the tank for me wasn't really that important. You can see you can see some drips, that line right there. I mean, like I said, it's getting restored anyway, so I don't really care, but this stuff will ruin your paint. So if you are doing this to a tank that has a good paint job that you want to keep, I would say maybe putting a big towel around the area of the fill cap would probably be a good idea. But beyond that, we're just going to kind of let it sit in here for, I don't know, an hour. And every few minutes I'll come back and I'll kind of shake the tank vigorously with all this hardware in it and kind of help it break up the rust. But I will show you what happens when I drain it out. All right, so it's been about 20 minutes and I'm already letting it drain out here. Taking a look inside. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. Like I said, it's only been about 20 minutes, but I figured it looks good enough to work with. And why leave it in longer than you gotta? Up on the walls, can we get up on the walls there? It's hard to see with the camera, I know, but you can kind of see the wall. Oh, there you go. Yeah, it looks pretty clean. It's all bare metal. So, looking good. So let me get this drained all the way out and I will bring it back. But so far, so good. Okay, so as you saw previously, I started draining it all out, all of the acid and water mix. But I ran out of bucket space. I need to go grab another bucket to drain the rest into, but I got about a little more than half of it out. I just want to give you another look of what we see. Again, ignore this kind of rim here. I'm going to restore this all separately. Let's just focus on what's going on inside of the tank. And overall, I know it's hard to see. There's really no good way to get a good angle on this, but I mean that looks pretty good so far. That's all bare metal, and I mean I can see it better than you guys can, that the rest of the inside of the tank looks like this as well, with all this bare metal going on. So I'm gonna finish draining this out and we can discuss what to do after the metal has been completely stripped down like this, because we are not done yet. We need to protect this metal, and I will discuss that in a second. So I'll bring you back. Okay, now that we're back inside and got that all drained out, there's just a couple of things I want to address that I did not point out earlier. One, first and foremost, the petcock. So there's basically two ways you can do this. You can either leave the petcock in or try and take it out and plug it. I usually just leave them in when I do kind of gas tank restorations, because to me, petcocks are pretty inexpensive. I already have a brand new one for this tank, and it ran me about, I don't know, 10 bucks, maybe even a little less. So you should really probably replace your petcock anyways if you're restoring an old gas tank, just to make sure you're always getting fresh fuel into the fuel system. Or of course, I've seen people, like I said, plug it. What I would recommend for that, I have tried that before and it does work well. It's not really going to create as good of a seal as a petcock will, but if you're going to plug it, go to like Lowe's or Home Depot. In the hardware section, they sell different size cork. So if you kind of measure the size that you have on your tank for an opening, you can find the right size cork, go to the store and buy the proper plug. Secondly, in terms of as you getting the nuts and bolts out that you saw me drop in earlier, I have a magnet that is really long and can be adjusted, so you can kind of quite literally fish out all of the hardware that you put in. Again, pretty inexpensive. I think I paid like $6 for it. Just an adjustable long magnet. Or you can just simply flip the tank over and try to shake them all out, which is very doable, but it just can get kind of tedious after a while. So I would definitely recommend getting the magnet. Now, in terms of where we are now that the tank is completely stripped out down to bare metal, what I do is, what I recommend anybody else do if you're going to do this process, or really any other gas tank cleaning process, is I flush out the entire tank with just water from a garden hose. Just stick the hose into the fill and let the water go through it and flush it all out. I then take my heat gun. If you don't have a heat gun, you can use a hair dryer, that works too, and just stick it in the fill hole and just blow out with hot air through the tank. That'll kind of dry it out, get all the moisture out, and blow all the excess water out. And then from there, what I do personally is, because what's going to happen is if you leave that bare metal uncoated for even just a few minutes, you can see it happen right before your eyes pretty fast. That's actually going to flash rust because that metal has no form of sealant on it. So what I do is I personally use two-stroke fuel that you can buy at the store, some premix, like 40 to 1 or 50 to 1, doesn't really matter. And the mix of gasoline and oil, pouring it in and kind of shaking the tank around will coat all of the edges. And what that does is it'll prevent the metal from rusting not nearly as fast as it would if it was unprotected. That'll, kind of save you a few days of not having to worry about it getting flash rusted. As for this tank, I'm personally going to be sealing it, and that's kind of the direction that I would recommend anybody go if you have a rusty gas tank that you're stripping out like this. Definitely do your research online. I usually use POR 15. Just get a nice quality gas tank sealant kit and just seal off the inside of the gas tank. I actually have another gas tank here on a other motorcycle. This is a 76 Honda CB550, And if you look inside this gas tank that I did the same cleaning method on, you can see it's all kind of perfectly silver inside. That's not bare metal, that's actually a gas tank sealant. And what that's going to do is that's going to prevent this gas tank from ever kind of rusting again. And you can always pour gas in it with the peace of mind of knowing that, you know, it's always going to be clean and you're not going to contaminate your fuel system. But beyond that, that's just kind of what I recommend. Again, we used the Zep acidic toilet bowl cleaner, a gallon in the tank, filled the rest of the way up with water, threw some hardware in there. You don't necessarily have to do that, but it will kind of help speed up the process. What you saw here today, I let it sit in there for really only 20 or 30 minutes, and it did a good job of stripping all the rust out. It is very quick. Just be careful, like I said earlier, if you don't want to get on your paint, take precaution, and that's really it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'm pretty good about answering comments. If you have any tips of your own, leave them, but this is what I recommend, and in my opinion, it is the best way of cleaning out your gas tank. So, good luck.